Can't hear you.
Hello, mate. You okay?
Perfect. Can hear you now. Yeah, not bad. Thank you.
Always same thing every time, mate. But I'm glad that you're good, mate. I'm glad that you're good.
Good. Yeah, and you all right?
Yeah, good, mate. A little bit gutted that I've only got a week left of the school holidays, but can't sort of complain, mate, to be honest. But yeah, pretty positive considering, mate. So yeah, it's good.
It's flown by, really, isn't it?
Well, too right. Well, last time we spoke, mate, you were almost a year younger. Now we're speaking, you're a year older, mate. So it's all positive.
Yep. Not
You
well.
can't
Yeah,
tell.
it's a new year, new start.
Well, we can't tell, mate. The youthful looks live forever with you, mate. So everyone you're coming on, you're looking always dapper, mate. So I like it. I like it, mate.
Thank you, mate, and you.
Well, no problems at all, mate. So obviously, since the last time we spoke, which was obviously a week ago, um, as we're currently speaking now, I can see the Chelsea score literally ticking in the corner of my eye. So Wolves just scored, and it was 5-3. VAR's just ruled that out, and I can see that Chelsea made it 6-2. So I've got
Oh,
this
wow.
open on like flash score. I haven't got it open on a game, so I'll definitely, as I said, you rewatch this full tomorrow. But yeah, there's currently 6-2 up, mate. When I thought we were like 2-2 at halftime, I thought, do you know what, we might get a result here. We're building, but this looks positive football at the moment. 6-2. It's pretty good, mate.
Yeah, especially at Molineux, it's a very tough place to go as well, isn't it? And
Especially with what Gary
that's-
O'Neill has done there.
yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good positive step in the right direction from after last weekend's performance against Manchester City.
It was. I think it was always going to be tough playing Man City. Well established, good team. Obviously, Pep Guardiola, good manager, and it's one of those that unless we got a world class manager, I don't think we were going to get off the floor straight away. But Maresca's got his time, and I think he needs literally a couple of years himself to just jig that squad around a little bit, get his way of playing, and for Chelsea to go, do you know what? He's got a 5-year contract. We need to give him minimum of 2 years, and then start to review it a little bit in year 3, and then maybe year 4. And even if we go 4 years without trophies, you need to look at what he's trying to instill in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what he needs. Maresca needs the time to have that, to get his own stamp on it. It's no point of having a 6-month project, 9-month projects, and it could be all over. I think Todd Bowley's got to reassess it with the squad as well. He's bringing his own stamp of players in now, Maresca as well. So it's really looking good for Chelsea after today's performance. I think that's going to be a good step going into the second leg for your European game in the week.
And I think also, on top of what you say there, right? I think when you evaluate the other clubs in the league, you've got Liverpool who've just got Arne Slot, right, who's just come in, and they're going to evaluate his position over what he's trying to instill. You've got Arsenal again building with Arteta. You've got the sort of City situation whether Guardiola's going to stay. You've always got United who are up and down, whether it's a positive, and then next week it's always a negative within that. You've got Chelsea who are building, you've got Villa, you've got your Spurs, mate. So you've got these sort of clubs which are building around it. Then you've also got West Ham just outside of that because they've made some moves this summer. Brighton are obviously doing quite well. So it's quite a tough moment to make any judgment very quickly because I think it depends on what your Liverpool, your City are going to do, and then I think it's dependent on what Arsenal and Liverpool do behind that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's with the league, it's going to be a very competitive division this season. A lot of twists and turns, I think, going to be in store. It's shown in these couple of weeks early on, I think. And I mean, Liverpool have got Brentford at home later this afternoon, and that's on paper going to be a good game. I don't think it'd be necessarily straightforward for Arne Slot this afternoon because Brentford are always very well organised themselves.
So at the moment, I've got the predictions down now. I looked through some scores yesterday for Super Six, right? And I put 1-1 for that game. So at the moment, my prediction is 1-1 for that. What about you? What's your feeling?
I still think Liverpool will win, but it'd be a close game. 2-1 Liverpool.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. I think it'll be a very close knit game where at least Brentford will get one. And I think Liverpool won 1-0 last week, but I think they're going to take a few weeks to click. And then when they do, they'll be flying again. But I think they're at those building stages, and Brentford aren't a team that roll over very easily either.
No, absolutely. Thomas Frank organises sides very well.
Mm.
They're very compact and very good going forward on transition. So I reckon though Brentford had a difficult season last season, I think that was just a one-off. I think they're going to come back 10 times stronger this season. I reckon they're going to try and compete for at least a top half finish again.
Obviously, going to be a very tough top half finish with how the other clubs are sort of started, but I'm with you there, mate, because I'm a big Thomas Frank fan, as you know, and I just want him to sort of come back up and do well in between in the league and what they're doing, and just be like, do you know what? He's not one of the top class managers of the league, but he's actually done a really decent job on like limited funds. Challenging against teams who are investing big time, like your Villas, like your West Hams now, like your Spurs, who are behind the top five, right?
Mm.
And it's still very tough. And you've got Brighton now who are coming up. So it's forever changing. And if you're challenging for that top 10 as a Brentford team without huge investment, you're actually doing pretty well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was a bit. Part of me was in the back of my head last season when they had that terrible season. I'm thinking, are they going to get, be a bit panicky and sack Frank after a bad season, because
Mm.
of how they've achieved so well before. But they've stuck by him, and I hope it pays dividends in that respect because yeah, he's a top coach, top manager in the game, and I think he could go to a bigger club in the Premiership
Mm.
in a management position later on down the line, whether that be United, say, or elsewhere. I think he has earned his respect in the league now and everybody around him.
I agree with you, mate. And it's definitely going to be interesting. I've been watching a few interviews with him, and he said he's very committed to what he's doing at Brentford at the moment. And a lot of questions were coming when you're leaving, when you're leaving. I've read a lot on YouTube of like people who've watched the videos and they're like, can you just stop asking him about him leaving? But I felt like a little bit of him is, yes, he's very committed, but I think he's very open to a project that would come his way. So as much as, okay, nothing's going to come up for Brentford, say Brentford did not approach this year for him, he will stay. And again, same next year unless he gets offered somewhere. But I think if someone came in and tried to sway him with a bigger sort of budget and position, he might actually go, do you know what? It might actually be time for me to take that next step forward now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a real possibility. I mean, like you say, with the limited funds and everything like that, it would be very difficult. But I'd like in that next part of projects with Brentford for him to get European football, even if it was Conference League, just to see how they establish, because I think that could be a fairy tale in itself, really.
Well, it'd be great to see that, mate, and I think it'd be very interesting to see, a side like that compete in a European trophy and see how that goes down. But something that I saw on Twitter yesterday, right, was a lot of calls for Everton to sack Sean Dyche, right, and replace him with David Moyes. Now, a lot of people think that he would return. There are very, very mixed reviews as I kept reading different sort of threads and different forums on it, right? And some people are saying, do you know how good he would be coming back and he would stabilize the ship and all this? And other people are saying we need to be really dynamic and appoint someone else into that role and not sort of go backwards into like a David Moyes, right, from a Sean Dyche. And Sean Dyche is finishing all this. But Everton weren't great last year. They don't have a great squad. They're obviously facing a lot of financial issues at the moment. As we just discussed there, that league is getting tougher and tougher in terms of that financial stakehold. Even Crystal Palace are trying to compete up there as well now, and they haven't got huge funds. But Everton just don't seem to be. I've just got this feeling they're not going to be strong enough to stay up this year, and they're just going to hit that bottom three. But what's your thoughts on Everton reappointing David Moyes, and where do you think they'll finish?
I think everyone will stay up. The only thing that concerns me with, I suppose, it's a proven goal scorer. They need a proven goal scorer at that level. They need a bit of creativity as well. I mean, it's shown in the last two games. I mean, it's a very unlike Dyche sort of team, if you like, to concede 7 goals in 2 games. Um, it- I suppose it's unheard of. I think for calls for him to be outed are a bit um, personally am over the top considering Everton have got loads of injuries in their backline, particularly. That's what I was trying to think of. So there's still time for them to rebuild. David Moyes going back. I can see what fans are wanting, but that's probably their heart saying that because of what success he had with the club. I don't think it's as rosy at the football club as everyone or supporters make it out to be. I mean, there's still not had a takeover completed. There's been a lot of talks with potential new owners going in, then pulling out. It's very uncertain times for Everton at the moment. Without sounding for pun, they can't get in a sticky toffee situation. Um, but it's
Lately.
now, yeah, I think Dyche is your man. All right, if they want to go further than just to keep up, maybe look elsewhere. But I still don't think you can dismiss Sean Dyche. I still think he's got it, and he's got so much respect by many people in the game.
I think he's still held in regard, and I think the jurisdiction is out for him a little bit because of what he's done at Everton last year. I think he's done an incredible job to keep him up despite 2 point deductions
Mm.
at separate points, and with a squad that was sitting in and around relegation and we're in and out, in and out, in and out, and to keep him up. And they've had a bit of a tough start this year, but I think some people are, are starting to sway. Oh, actually, is he as good as a manager as he was at Burnley? He got relegated. He just about kept everything up. They're not starting well. And again, it's all perspective, as we spoke about over the last few weeks, right? Of going, all right, on paper, it's not looking very good. Or actually, he's done a really good job. And even when you look at Burnley being relegated, they came back up with Vincent. They got relegated with Vincent despite him winning the league by record points. I think that just shows that okay, it wasn't just Sean Dyche. It was two different managers on two different occasions,
Mm.
and the two different owners who have made decisions, and they've ended up being relegated. Okay, Sean Dyche was sacked with like 4 or 5 games to go before they got relegated. But a lot of people will place that blame of, well, actually, he had majority of the season. He left them just around the relegation zone, and then they've dropped in and whatever that position was at the time. But
I
I
mean, I
think
think
that,
you've got for now on head there, Luca. I think look on you now. I mean, if they didn't have points deduction last season, Everton, they'd have been top half, wouldn't they?
mm,
Um, and that would have been an amazing achievement, really, considering where they was at. With Burnley, I still when he got set by Burnley with them games to go, I was still surprised at the timing of that second.
mm,
Because I mean, Dyche, he never really had that statistic of never getting relegated. And I still feel that Burnley would have found a way to have stayed up inadvertently.
I think so too as well. And I think they were in that position where they made a rush judgment to try and sack him to go, right, we need someone else in who can pull us out and try and keep us up. And we've seen other clubs do that over the years with Sam Allardyce on 2 separate occasions now, and both of those clubs have ended up being relegated. So he was always known to be a manager who was never relegated and then ended up having 2 sort of back-to-back relegations in the jobs that he came into when he was appointed in those positions. But I think that it's definitely going to be um, an interesting season in terms of who finishes where and what the outcomes would be. And even like Newcastle, right? We haven't even mentioned them, and they're a bit of a powerhouse in terms of the squad they have available. They drew 1-1 with Bournemouth, and Bournemouth had a pretty all right season last year, to be honest. And even teams like Newcastle is like, where will they end up because of how competitive that league is, right?
Mm.
And it's just it's amazing for us as fans because we get to see so many different teams and how many different teams are going to be up and around it and who's competing and pushing for qualification as well as the title. So I think it's going to be one of the best seasons for the years that me and you have been alive for us to see competitively.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited to see what the season brings with Newcastle. I think this is it as well. They've got that luxury with the squad and the depth that they can choose from in respects with positions. While Amanda Staveley and the other co-owner had stepped down from their position, I think that come as a bit of a hammer blow for Newcastle in some sense because everyone felt good around the place, and I even felt while those as owners that Eddie Howe's job was stable. Even now that it could be different, change of hands with ownership and direction, if he doesn't get the results, his job could be way under pressure again because he's not performing with that squad. And again, that's what makes the Premiership what it is. It's a very cutthroat division because you've got to be very successful and be able to compete and consistently.
And when it's that consistently and how competitive it is, right? One young manager that we have seen at the moment is the Brighton manager, Fabian Hertzler, right? He's obviously come in, started very well with Brighton, obviously beat United 2-1 yesterday. Very positive start, 2 out of 2 wins. They're looking to be a positive side, especially on the back of De Zerbi, especially on the back of Graham Potter within that. So as a club, they've sort of gone up and up and up, and they've continued building in terms of those decisions. But it's going to be interesting to see how the season unfolds, what he actually brings to Brighton, and where they're going to sit in and around the table and where he gets them. And I think you can have a bit of an argument at the end of the season going, do you know what, first year in Premier League, still a very young manager, still doesn't have, he's only got like 3 years of managerial experience behind him. So even if they finish anywhere above relegation and they finish, I don't know, comfortably from say 14th upwards, they can go, do you know what, that's a good season, let's go again next year. And he's the kind of manager you can invest in. But he's definitely someone who I think raised a few eyebrows when he was appointed. I think he's come in and had a strong start. And obviously, you know, there's going to be questions starting to be asked of him now at the moment of whether that he's going to stay competitive, etc. But I think it's definitely an interesting position on that Brighton scope.
Oh, absolutely. I have to give full credit to the whole of Brighton's recruitment team. I think they seem to find great players and great managers. With the young fella that's just taken over now, I mean, I was listening to his interview on Match of the Day last week, and I have to say I was very impressed with what he had to say, and he talks a good game. I know we say in life, actions speak louder than words, but it's showing on the picture at the moment with 6 points out of six. And I find it just so refreshing to find someone so young taking a top flight job though. And for it to be Brighton, I think that's the perfect model and perfect fit for that to happen because it might give other clubs in for top flight an initiative to say, you know what, look what he's achieved with Brighton. What can we do? Can we look down this path maybe in the future? It sets the tone then for the rest of the Premiership.
Absolutely, and I think it's about considering those young managers and looking towards the future, giving time, building towards the future, and is the position of other managers how they're scrutinised the internal decisions, i.e., Chelsea, based upon what the other clubs are doing. Are they going to try and rush and sack, Maresca? Or are they going to give him time based upon what the other clubs are doing? And a perfect model of that, right, is what Arsenal have done with Arteta. So at the moment, he's won Community Shields, he's won FA Cups, he's gone qualified for the Champions League, he's rebuilt the squad, he's developing as a young manager, but they've got a lot of consistency. They're challenging, and they're playing against a very good Pep side at the moment, right? If they dropped off and they weren't getting, top 5, top 6, and then there would be questions asked. But he's got them competing at the moment. I think he's a decent manager. Like I was out yesterday and I had the Villa game and Arsenal game literally on the scoreline on my phone, right? And I thought, you know what, it's now. Aston Villa on here stats wise look to be the much better team. And then by the time I flicked my phone up again, Arsenal have won the game 2-0. I was like, that just shows the quality that you can turn into that game against a very good Unai Emery. I think he is a good manager, Arteta, and I think he is building something there. And Arsenal don't have to be in a rush position to sack him. And then who would they go and appoint if they did sack him, for example? So I think they're in a position where Chelsea are looking at them going, actually, we need to take that stance at the moment. We've also invested a lot more money than they have. We need to sort of go, just settle down now for a little bit and just have a bit of consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very it's very refreshing and speaking from a Spurs fan, it is and keeping it neutral here. Arsenal have done fantastic with Arteta. I mean, when they got rid of Unai Emery and that, I was questioning, and when they brought Arteta in, I was questioning it as well. I was thinking, really, if you want to go to that next level, are you going to be able to compete on all fronts? And credit where it's due, he's done really, really well. Arteta, he's galvanised that squad. He's got the best out of them. I mean, the defensive stability now is unreal. And to get rid of some of, I call like egos, if you like, people that wasn't, I'd say, wearing the shirt with pride, or like Mesut Ozil and the end, how it turned out with David Luiz and so on and so forth. It just didn't work out for Arsenal. And I think they've got a young, hungry squad that are ready to compete on all fronts. Europe this season, I think they're going to go even stronger because they've learned from their Premiership experience. As you say, I think the only team that really stands in their way is Pep's City side. But I do think it's going to be very, very close between them two for the title again.
I think so as well, mate. And I think for me, they're going to be the top two teams when it comes to end of the season. But we sort of touched upon how we're looking towards the bottom. We've sort of got a scope over the league and how competitive it is. But towards the end, we'll start mentioning who we will think will end up where for our end of season predictions, and we'll get a graphic out for that, right, mate? But there are sort of two Arsenal related pieces of news. One is a manager sort of relation, but we'll come back to that in a bit. But one is transfer news because we've still got the transfer window at the moment. So Eddie Nketiah, currently linked with Nottingham Forest. This was a few days ago now, but a £30 million for the 25-year-old. Is that a good move for Arsenal? Is it sort of like another Danny Welbeck situation, i.e. United selling Danny Welbeck and he's still now performing at the age of 33 at Brighton? Are they going to be in that same position to go in, do you know what, we actually could have kept him for a bit of squad rotation or depth? Or is it actually a good move for them to offload him, considering, as you say there, although they talk about offloading egos, Eddie Nketiah isn't one with a big ego. But if they're looking at slimlining that squad and having, world-class players, cutting off Eddie Nketiah, is he a world-class player? No. So therefore, would it make sense for Arteta to sell him?
I think he's a good squad player to have, though, as an option off the bench. It's a good signing for Forest. It's something that they need. And Nketiah has proved that in the Premiership that he can compete at the top flight level. It's I look on it on both sides. I think it's a good move for Nketiah's personal development to get more game time. But then on the Arsenal side, in terms of depth, it might be just something that might be missing. But then they can reinvest that £30 million. I mean, that is quite a handsome bit of money. I mean, didn't he come through their youth?
Yes, youth
Um,
player as well, mate.
so it's they've not made a loss or anything like that. It's a nice tidy profit there, and they can just reinvest that into the squad, find who's going to potentially replace him. There could be some good, exciting names out there, and I reckon maybe Arsenal are just short of maybe a proper in and out centre forward. That I mean, we know that what Martinelli can provide. We know what Saka can provide. But I think it just needs that extra forward in to get them over that line, maybe. Whereas you take City's got Haaland, Arsenal need someone of that ilk to get them over the line.
And Haaland is just world class. I think I saw a graphic yesterday, a short on YouTube, right, of Michael Richards digging Alan Shearer a little bit, because I think it's something like he's got a hat trick every 10 games. He has an X amount of hat tricks in 68 games, right? So his record compared to like Terry Henry, Alan Shearer, Wayne Rooney, Didier Drogba, right? Bergkamp and an array of other names. He is leading that pack, and it's unbelievable, those statistics. And when I watched his finish against Chelsea last week for City, it was just unbelievable, the strength that he moved Aspilicueta, Cucurella off him, literally bang, shoulder, touch, move, finish. Incredible world-class quality. And I think that's what Arsenal's missing.
Absolutely. I think with it was some technique. And I mean, even you could argue that Haaland didn't have the best of season last campaign. But he's still got in his locker. We know what he's all capable of. It's just, yeah, Arsenal need that. I'm just trying to think who would fit that mould of an Arteta team as well, because it needs to be suited to his style of football, his way of playing, his philosophy. And I'm sure there are people out there, but it's got to be for the right person, I suppose.
Always, mate, always that right person. But on to the second piece of transfer news regarding Arsenal. Aaron Ramsdale potentially in a move to Wolverhampton, who we've previously mentioned in this episode this week. But Do you think that's a good move for him? Is it a good move for Wolves? Is it about time that he moved on rather than sitting in a number 2 at Arsenal, do you reckon?
He needs game time. I mean, don't get me wrong with David Raya come in and done well at Arsenal. I mean, what a save yesterday! If you saw it, Luca, I don't know if you did, but
No,
it was you have to see it. It was some save from a rebound from off the crossbar, and yeah, reaction save was like wow. But Ramsdale, on the other hand, Wolves. I mean, good signing. Fit again, I suppose would fit in with Gary O'Neill model. Got plenty of experience. I mean, really, you could argue that Raya came in. He's done a good job, as I say, but it was harsh when Ramsdale had to drop out because he was in really good form then as well. Um, and to get his place back in the England squad, I mean, it's shown with Jordan Pickford's mistake yesterday against Spurs that he's still, I think, a bit mentally struggling after a few Euros, Pickford. He didn't seem to be his normal self, if you like, gyrating about and pumping everyone up. So I think this would be a perfect chance for Ramsdale to show his case to Lee Carsley, that's in temporary charge, of what he can do and maybe get a spot back in the England team.
and I think that's the kind of move he has to make just to reignite his career a little bit because, unless you're playing, the odd cup game and maybe covering Rare if he's picked up a knock for the week, right? He's still getting literally a handful of games per year. And if you're doing that for, say, 2-3 seasons in a row, that's not enough momentum. And he just about got into that England side, I think, because we were lacking a bit of consistency among our goalkeepers in terms of there was on paper, technically, he's one of our best goalkeepers. So how can you argue about dropping one of our best goalkeepers? But then he's not in form, not playing enough games. But I think he was a good sort of decision to take to the Euros. But when he started that friendly game, which I was pleased to see him starting, he wasn't in that consistent form and got caught out straight away and just looked completely off the mark. So I think if he wants to get back into the England squad at least or maintain that place and especially under a new manager now is going, actually, I might not even select you. I think going out to Wolves, and although they're not an Arsenal, they're not a top 6 team, they're still a very decent club under Gary O'Neill. Has a chance to go in and be number 1. Has a chance to maybe go in and prove himself. And with us winning 6-2 today, this might be a good move for Wolves to go. Do you know what? We actually do need the goalkeeper, depending on what those saves were like today, etc., and performance, for us to go and get him. But I personally think that's a move that needs to be made.
I agree. I think that's the only thing that I'd have as a little bit of a concern is who Arsenal would have as a reserve if Rayo did get injured or was out for any other reason. However, because that's what I look with. You take for like the City, they've got Edison, but they've got Ortega. That's a pretty good, astute backup. I know he's wanted to leave. It's been made clear recently for more game time. But what a backup! All for top sides. I mean, Chelsea, they've got an abundance, as you know, Luca, to choose from. That's where I think even Spurs have come a bit stuck, if you like. We've got Vicario, good number 1 goalkeeper, but reserve. I mean, we've got Fraser Forster. I mean, yes, he's been a good keeper, good experience around, but he's just come back. He was out of most of pre-season. I'd rather us go for. I mean, I didn't really know much of Vicario before he joined, if I'm honest. So I'd like something a bit fresh. Again, it's that depth, isn't it, to have in your squad to be able to make you compete on all fronts. With Wolves, I mean, they've got Jose Sarr that's in his 30s now, that's had a good career in front of him, really, with where he's been at and what he's done. But that would be a good, I suppose, backup for Wolves that Ramsdale comes in, Sarge a backup keeper in return if he does get injured. So
And I'm in full support of our English keepers and English players, mate, because I think we need to get them playing. I think they need to get game time, and I think it's important for us to get those current international players to have a place in the squad which is recognised. Because again, we want to be one of the leading nations in the world, but how can we be a leading nation if our second goalkeeper is never playing games and getting minutes? It does make a bit of a mockery of the system, for example. So then you look at players like Fraser Forster in that example, and okay, makes a good backup. He's good to have around the place, but he's not a world class keeper to go and replace your number 1 goalkeeper or to drop in. And Ramsdale is good enough to drop in, but he's also very good enough to be number 1 elsewhere. So rather than sit around at Arsenal, I think it is that position where he has to sort of move on as well. But just touch upon some England news. Obviously, Julian Lescott is linking up with the England FA squad, so he'll be coming in as a member of staff. Ashley Cole will remain as Birmingham assistant manager, but comes in as assistant manager to the first team. So I think they're both positive moves just to reignite, some experience back into the squad, to bring some stability, to bring recognised former players who have now become recognised current coaches into the fold. They're obviously coaches and individuals that Lee Carsley trusts, and I think it's great to see players like Ashley Cole back in the national setup at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard a lot of good things about him from a Birmingham City friend of mine. He's gave really praise for Ashley Cole. And what an opportunity for him to have that as even if it's a audition or cameo role. What experience to have that on your CV to be part of England set up. And it's a young, impetus, new, fresh look, but it's an exciting time because you'd love to see how all these get on in their respective jobs. Really, it's an exciting time.
And I think when you say fresh there, and I was a little bit gutted about this opposite move. So Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank has left the English FA setup, but some people are saying he could actually be appointed as a youth coach or one of the managers of the youth team. So it's yet to be seen what happens there. But what your friend says there from a Birmingham City perspective, right, mate? I'm really pleased to hear that, because I read through the thread on Twitter about that appointment of Ashley Cole, right? And I was reading through all the tweets and replies, and all the fans were really supportive of him, being like, "Well done, great," and saying how good he's doing at Birmingham, especially considering he came when Rooney was there, and he's still part of that backroom staff. But then I sort of went on Facebook, right, and I'm looking at the England FA about their post about Ashley Cole linking up and saying that it's great to have a legend back. And I'm reading through the comments on there, right? And the difference between the comments between Birmingham City fans and England fans, the England fans were so toxic, going, "Oh, you're not a legend. The term is thrown around so loosely, all this and that," and it was just not like. It wasn't just, "Oh, welcome aboard," or "good luck," and all this. It was so like negative compared to Birmingham. I'm like, that's just England fans, regardless. Every sort of thread, whether I read it on Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, they're always negative and so toxic. I'm like, this is why we don't have success, is because you're always bringing the team down, whether it's coaching the staff, whether it's the manager, whether it's the players. And it's just a very volatile place to be in a fan base for the English team.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is it. There's no. You must have really thick skin to take on that job. um, for the amount of stick that you do get. I've seen it on social media as well, and you're like, hmm. And this is it. Is the only people that really know, that take on with Ashley Cole's instance, are Birmingham City fans because they've seen him involved with their club. I think we all can jump to conclusions so early when we don't see what they've done elsewhere in their career. We've associated them as a player, but as we've said before, good players might not make good coaches, but bad, not so good players might make really good coaches. Ashley Cole has had um, he's had a very good background behind him through his playing career, and he has represented England. So why not? You need someone that's had that ilk and that drive to wear for badge with pride.
And I think on his coaching experience there, right, he's worked with Lampard, he's worked with Rooney, he's now worked with Lee Carsley. So he's had an array of different managers that he's worked across. He's worked from the academy at Chelsea. He's been in the Everton first team, right? And so he's obviously stepped up between environments and elite environment. He's worked under different sort of contexts. He's been in the Premier League. He's gone back down to the Championship. He now works under Chris Davis at Birmingham City. So he's 4 different managers he's worked under. He's worked in Championship and Premier League. He's now at the national level. For him, he's picked up so much different experience and is sort of taking that time. He might just remain as a coach and might have a good career because of it, or we might actually see him become a manager at some point. So I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see. One of the results I was sort of monitoring yesterday was Plymouth and with Wayne Rooney, because I'm very interested to see how they get along over the course of the season. They're only 3 games in. They've lost 1, they've drawn 2. So they drew 1 yesterday. That's not a bad start considering they also won once in the cup. So over 4 games, 1 win, 2 draws, 1 loss. and I think they're in like 1 minus goal difference across the course of those games. But in the league, they're doing okay at the moment. I think if they pick up a win next week, it'll just give them a bit of momentum. But definitely an interesting side for this Plymouth team and Wayne Rooney, like we've mentioned in the last few weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, to come away. I mean, they was down to 10 men for quite a while of that game. Wasn't they yesterday against QPR, from what I understand? Then they went down to 9 men.
Yes, mate. And even
um,
then, going down to 9 men and pulling a point away, positive.
exactly. It is positive, and I think, I mean, speaking through here at home and saying, really, that's onus to Rooney in that respect, because I mean, let's face it, Rooney never used to get many bookings as a player either.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, everyone would associate, I think, oh, that could be Rooney's sort of side getting into it, getting stuck in. But yes, he got stuck in, but he never, or he hardly got booked. He got, I think, 180 odd bookings or whatever in his whole career,
Yeah.
which in a long career, you could say is not too bad. I know he was a different position striker and that, but it's, I think Rooney's it's going to be an interesting next month for Rooney where it picks up, but there's positives to take. Even if it's the smallest of positives, you've got to take it somewhere and put it into a bigger picture. Um, what they do um, for the next game, because they've been down to 9 men, does that mean they need to recruit in some extra bodies? I don't know how big Plymouth squad is, but it's a it's exciting. I did see that footage in the week where he pinned a 40-yard ball over in training. Did you see that on social
Yes, I
media?
did, mate. And it's come up in quite a lot of different podcasts and different discussions as well, because they said he'd done it in like a pair of like Air Max 90s or whatever it was, mate, and he just done it inch perfect. No boots on either, just a pair of typical trainers, and bang, he's launched it inch perfect to those in training, and they're like, we can't even do this ourselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, mate, it's definitely made the rounds, that one.
He's probably going to sign up himself as a squad registration if they fall short. Why not? If he's still got it. I mean, that's how bonkers football is. That's something like that could really well happen.
It could do, mate. And you know, I never understand why players retire at certain points, but that does lead us nicely on to sort of that conversation, as it always does, mate. So, a player who's retired from international football at the moment is Manuel Neuer, 15 years, 124 caps. So he's not the only German player to retire in the last few weeks, because they've also lost Thomas Muller, and I think they've lost someone else as well, on top of Tony Cruz retiring. So they've lost some key significant players. And I was just thinking the other day, right, for Nagelsmann, he must be like, oh, what, another loss to the team, another retirement. But it's also refreshing in a way, because you're like, I'm actually starting a new era of German football, and it's going to be my squad, my sort of imprint. But Manuel Neuer, I think, is 39. He's still number one to Bayern Munich. I think it's going to be a shame when I see any player retire at any point, right, who is consistently playing and still in top form. So number one to his national team, number one to Bayern. In the back of my head, I just cannot fathom retiring until you're forced out of that squad. So if the manager said, right, you're being dropped, I could understand him retiring. But if he's still number one and the manager had plans for him, I just don't get why you would retire anyway. Just keep going, get as many caps as you can, and consolidate yourself up that list of like German legends and all-time greats who have established caps amongst the international players. I don't get it myself, but you might have a different take.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's going to feel strange not seeing Manuel Neuer in between the sticks. It's, I think, what used to, and I mean, he's still got it. He's shown it. That he's still got it. Um, but I think, who knows? With it's again where football's evolving, isn't it? It's now a different game, and I wish him for best of luck. What he decides that he wants to do. I mean, still, like you say, playing good club level, but that's going to be a blow for the German national team.
Mm. And I think another goalkeeper who's come out earlier this week and has said he's not returning to the national setup because of a falling out with the manager is Courtois, who has said he isn't returning under Domenico Tedesco. I think I completely butchered that name, mate. But on the lot, he just said he's not coming back to the team at the moment. And I'm thinking, do you know what? That's actually probably a positive thing because you're always demanding. You were demanding at Chelsea. I think you didn't have a great relationship with Martinez. Now he's falling out with this manager. Didn't get selected for Euros because he had the year out injured. Now he's saying, I'm not coming back. And it's one of those where in the statement he said, I have approached the FA about this situation. So it's like, right, so you've taken the liberty to go above the manager's head to discuss your power as a player to go, I'm not coming back unless he is removed as a manager.
Hmm.
At what point then do the FA go, well, actually, we are going to sack him to give that player a bit of power and to show that players can make a decision on a manager's career? So they've actually gone the opposite and gone, okay, don't come back then. And as much as he might be a significant player, I think it's actually a positive of going, oh, I'm just awarding someone else to come up and play in that position. I'm going to shoot myself in the foot in the process. And the Belgium FA are probably going to go, all right, bit refreshing. And the manager's going to go, I'm glad I've got the backing of the FA above me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it just goes to show how volatile football is. I mean, with that sort of behaviour, you would expect to see it at grassroots, wouldn't you? Really, because of
That's it, mate.
throwing from manager under the bus like that. I don't understand why players. Don't get me wrong, I understand for their own career and that, but to go like that and take it above, and like just say go above the manager and to report it to the FA, it's slimy, and I don't like that side of the game because you
Mm.
think like, well, if just accept it. I mean, managers come and go, players come and go. The only people that really stay in football true all the time is for supporters, of course. But if he really cares about his nation and that, then he'll do what's in best interest of his nation and his teammates, not for his own development.
And I think that's a very good point there in terms of what you just made there about best interest and self interest and how that looks among maybe different perspectives of stakeholders, right? But as it relates to managers, and on the back of a very well transitioning conversation as always, and fitting in with the Belgian nationality, right? Someone who made his Bundesliga debut as a manager today. Mr. Vincent Company, who's come up in our previous conversation. So I was tracking the scoreline as we've been chatting as well. So their game was not long finished. So a nice 3-2 win for Bayern Munich in the opening game of the season. They did take the lead. Wolfsburg came back and were in the lead themselves. It came back 2-2. And I thought, you know what, away game, opening game of the season. Not a bad result that, but they've ended up pinching it 3-2. So not a bad start for them, and I think that's quite positive. So it's good to see former players doing well as a manager.
Oh, absolutely, and long may it continue for company. I mean, we've been saying throughout pre-season and that we've had our opinions on company, where it would lead. But again, that'd be a good foundation to build on, and hopefully that it continues in season for him. But I still find that bonkers that if Kane was to win a trophy with company, and he's gone through Mourinho, Conte, and all them, and it comes down to Vincent Company. I mean, that's a fairy tale in itself, my friend.
It would just be utter, again, foot manager scenes, mate. Just one of those, you're like, really? Vincent Company and Kane have won a trophy together. Again, it is literally like one of those actual football life imageries that you get when you're simulating that game, mate.
Oh, absolutely. That's what makes football for the most beautiful game.
Always, mate, always. But again, great transition, mate, because as we're talking about a German perspective here, a player who has actually been confirmed back since I clipped this the other day. Gundogan back at City. Obviously, Pep knows what he's doing. He likes the player. He's obviously been very open to taking a player of his quality back in the squad, a player who still offers something. And there was a lot of questions asked in the threads again that I read on Twitter and things like that, right? And again, when you come to fans and what you read on Twitter, it is always that case of how significant is their input, etc., etc. But I always try to gauge how the fans are feeling a bit on the basis of that, and sort of different angles from Spanish fans, etc., or German fans, whoever they may be, right? But considering Barcelona signed Olmo and they didn't have a place to register him, and then they're like, actually, we've got to move a player on. To let a player like Gundogan go and City go, oh, we'll get him back on a free after we made money off him to sell him to you. I think that is pretty good business, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've always rated him as a player. he's just phenomenal. I mean, he's been instrumental with City's main success over the years. I think when he was, I suppose, sent out to go to Barca, I was absolutely gobsmacked that City let him go. And I was only saying, I think it was before the Charity Shield, saying here at home again, like that's a jigsaw piece in the puzzle that City have been missing. They've not really replaced Gundogan, and now that they've got him back, it's going to push him over the line again. And yeah, very smart business. I mean, to get him on a free. I wish that Spurs were brave enough. He wouldn't have come to Spurs, but I wish that we could have been brave to at least try to compete. But we knew that wouldn't have been possible if City were lurking. And Pep, yeah, Pep knows what he's got and quality player.
Definitely a good player, mate. And I think he was linked with moves to Saudi Arabia as well. And I always think of when you're in that situation, and again, you see on Foot Manager, right, when you offload a player and they might come in with like 18 different offers. And you're like, right, if that was real life and you're in that position where you got 18 offers and you're that player, you might take one and it might never work out for you. Whereas if you took one, you might have been the most significant player there. And it's always that difficult thing, unless you've got that crystal ball and maybe a time machine to go back and change decisions, then you're never going to really know. And that's the difficult thing in life in general as well. But he's turned down big money out in Saudi. He's come back to City. But a player who, in the opposite direction, who's maybe being linked with Saudi is this man here, Ivan Toney. So he's been in talks with Al Ahly. There's a lot of back and forth about this on Sky Sports and that, right? And they're like apparently weighing up 60 million Brentford that they want for him. Saudi clubs are only trying to get to like 30, right? I don't think he's worth 60 million pound, but I don't think Brentford are outrageous in trying to get as much as they can for a player like Toney. Do you think if he goes out to Saudi, that's his career over for the national side and his decisions there? Or do you think it's actually good for Brentford to part ways with him? Or do you think they should be taking him on for another year and trying to negotiate a contract extension?
I think all three can apply what you just mentioned there. I mean, with I was listening to what Paul Merson was saying yesterday on Soccer Saturday, and he was saying pretty much along the lines of that he thinks it's a decline for Ivan Toney, and I have to agree with Merson on that. I think it is. He could still compete at a very good level in the Premiership, at top flight teams that have been interested. It could well work in his favour that it might get him in for set up a bit more with England if he. Uh, when I say a bit more, I mean he was getting games regularly with Brentford, but it's. I still don't know. I think 60 mil, like you say, is he worth that? Maybe not. But with Brentford, you can't blame them for trying to get the most money that they can for probably their biggest asset of the club. Um, Yeah, I just think personally it is a huge decline, and if he does go over to Saudi, I'll be disappointed for him because I think that's pretty much his career over.
And I think it's again, there's very mixed reviews about his personality, about how his attitude sinks in as well with Ivan Toney. And I don't know, I've never really taken much notice of his personality and attitude until this sort of rumors come up and speculation. And I've sort of been reading and doing some, in-depth stuff behind it, watching some videos, the interviews, etc. And it seems that Brentford fans would actually be happy to see the back of him rather than keeping him, for example. So I think it's time they wash their hands of him, collecting on 30 mil. Then it's up to him to try and rebuild his career or spend a few years out in Saudi, collect this big payday, and then sort of swivel away in his career kind of thing. So I think it's definitely going to be interested in, those types of players. And just as I'm saying that, I'm not sure if you can remember, but he was linked with Spurs at one point, Saido Berahino. So
Yes,
yesterday, I think he's confirmed to have signed for some Indian club. I think his career sort of takes a little bit of a stance of Toney, whereas if
yep,
Toney goes out to Saudi, he either comes back to an all right club here in England, or he ends up dropping down and having finishing off his career very averagely.
agreed. I 100% agree with everything that you just said there. I um I just don't know with I've found it as well though. When Ivan Toney was available after his betting ban last year at Brentford, when they was without Toney, they seemed to have a bit more freedom about their play. They seemed a bit more relaxed. They didn't feel that because he wasn't in the squads, there was as much pressure. Since he came back, it seemed like Brentford sort of declined. I'm not. It just seemed there wasn't as much freedom for them to play in that respect. With that money though, because they're not a big spending club anyway, it'd be interesting how they reinvest that money.
Mm. Yes, definitely. I think it's one of those where we're getting closer towards the end of the transfer window, and if they want to try and have a replacement of someone who has been a significant figure for them and having that role, then they need to sort of get a move on and get that done. But for us as Chelsea, right, Raheem Sterling could be leaving Chelsea. I think the way he's been treated at the moment is I like a very direct manager. I like a manager who comes out and says, right, I want to do this, this, and this, right? But I also have not liked the way Maresca has gone in on Sterling. And okay, his attitude isn't great. And perhaps we've seen it in the past with Brendan Rodgers when he's come down like a ton of bricks on him. Pep Guardiola's moved him on, and he's a significant managers in the past. Now Maresca's come in and he's not maybe favouring him. So this with the Sterling argument, there's always, do you know what, we've seen this in the past before. But the way he sort of treated Ben Chilwell and Conor Gallagher as well, they're three English players. Two of them have been in and around the England squad more recently, but yet he seems to just be happy to move these on. Obviously, you might have favours, and we've seen this from managers over the years where, you know, Ten Hag at the moment, he's brought in a lot of Dutch players. We see Arteta, he has a nice mix of Spanish influx. Same for Pep Guardiola, right? But the what do you think of Sterling? Do you like him? Is he a negative? Is he an addition to a squad? Is he someone, if as a Spurs fan, you would go and sign? What's your thoughts around him?
Yeah, he's a great squad option to have. You can play him out wide and you can play him through the middle. He's got that flexibility to do everything. He had that spell with England that was good. He's had spells with City good. Chelsea, I agree with Maresca. I think how he's treated Sterling, Chilwell, and Gallagher. I think personally, it's not great man management. I think it's awful man management because you come out publicly and said it, especially with Chelsea fans that have had a bit of a soft spot for Conor Gallagher as well. That's come through for youth. Quite a few Chelsea fans that I know that have quite a liking to Ben Chilwell. You know, with Raheem Sterling, though, he's got that quality we know he has. All three of them have really. Chilwell can be class on his day, so can Gallagher, and so can Sterling. Um, but if I was Spurs, yeah, why not? I mean, we're quite overloaded with players out wide now after Wilson Odegaard's surprise signing. But in terms if it was someone through the middle, I'd go and say, go and sign him. Why not?
Mhm.
Um, and I still feel with that Chelsea squad, though it's quite bloated at the moment, he still could do a job in that team. Um, I mean, he was part of City's success that got him for titles as well, don't forget. So he's got a lot of positives to him. We don't know what goes behind the scenes. We don't see what demeanour that Sterling is turning up to training with. But something's occurred with him over recent years with Pep to let him go in the end after persisting with him, and now Maresca out and him like that. Is there something more behind closed doors that we don't know about?
I think it's definitely interesting. I think more might unfold if he does move on from the club, for example. But just thinking of the type of clubs that he would sort of go to in the league to, you know, try and fight maybe for an England place back to really push himself, or whether he would do in Toney and go out to Saudi. But you know, for other clubs in the league, I think if he became available and Chelsea was still going to pay a majority of his wage and he was available on a loan, again, I think Spurs would be a good move, but I think they got too many players. I know there's been links with Arsenal, which for a career mind, Liverpool, City, Chelsea, Arsenal, that's not a that's not a bad career, mate, to
Not
be
bad,
honest.
is it?
It's pretty consistent at that level. But you look at squads like Everton who would scream out for a player like Sterling. I don't think he'd go based on the ego, and I think it'd be too much of a drop for him in terms of that quality. Whereas if you're going to a Spurs and a Villa, you're still up and around that level. But maybe a Brentford could come in for him if they offload Toney and they go, right, could we secure a cheap deal for Raheem Sterling and he's our replacement and he's willing to go there and drop his ego a little bit. I think that's not an actual bad move for Brentford in that sort of situation. But we'll get to
Absolutely.
see.
I totally agree. But I do think, thinking of it, I think for sort of mould that he plays and team setup, it would be good for Unai Emery and Aston Villa.
Absolutely, mate. And for us as Chelsea, right, a man who's just come in the opposite direction again, questions over his attitude and personality again. But João Felix has come into him. I'm a big João Felix fan. I want to see him hit consistency and have some good years ahead of him. And I think he does have quite. I don't think it's been unlocked yet, but I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see where it fits in the Chelsea squad and the players that we have. But again, a very stacked squad, and we brought João Felix in, right? What's your thoughts on that, mate?
I mean, we was sending texts to each other, weren't we, saying, "What? Another
Absolutely, we
one?"
were, mate.
It reminds me of that meme. What? Another one? Oh gosh, really?
Yes, mate.
Um,
Yes.
if you can find some meme for that, that'd be great. But
Yeah.
that's what we should use for Chelsea. um, but on a serious note, great signing for Chelsea. It's just, yeah. I mean, I was looking at Chelsea's lineup today, and tell me, as a Chelsea fan, was you surprised to see Mudryk, Jackson, and Madueke starting today?
What a selection of players, mate. It's so difficult because we have such a depth in squad. You're like, we've spent all this money. You're going to be happy and should be happy to see any player start because of the money we spent on them and the depth. And
Mm,
I'm a little bit like, right, we got so much talent in the squad. I want to make sure we harness the talent and they get the quality in there. And I don't want us to keep losing all these talent players and be known as a club for wasting them and, you know, just absolutely shutting players down. Um, and it is one where I want to see all of our players play well, but it's so difficult for us to have a consistent squad, but then to try and rotate with how big it is, but yet not to hamper talent, but to try and excel talent is a tough, tough job, mate. So I was pretty pleased to see it. I'm still again on the fence about Murdic, right? And Jackson. I like Jackson. I want him to be like the next Drogba. I want him to really do well. But I think he's got to offer me a bit more because the last
yeah.
few games I've seen him, he just isn't powerful enough. He just isn't like Haaland, where he is an absolute beast up front. He isn't, someone who goes in pinching goals or just got that killer instinct at the moment. I just don't see it in him yet. And I want to see a bit more from him. Again, Mirjic, I'm sat on the bench a little bit, and I don't think he's got to go in. But the results have sort of come out today, 6-2. If we consistently play that against a higher tier club, I think we'll get to then judge them on their quality a little bit. But it's a tough squad to have, mate.
I've got a question for you though. With João Felix, do you think that was a Maresca signing, or do you think that was a Todd Bowley signing?
I think it was a Ted Bowley signing because he's got in his mind who he wants and who he's going to bring in, right? And that's why we've brought in so many different players, and that's why it's a mix of so many different personalities. And I think that's why Sterling is going in the opposite direction because Bowley's gone. We've got all these players. I want these players that I've invested in, not the players who I think are no longer part of my plans. And that's why Maresca has treated these players in the way that he has because he's been told you have to move them on. And I think he's a Bowley signing, mate, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, again, I suppose we're talking about jobs, but would you feel comfortable working under Todd Bowley? Because I'd
Absolutely not,
feel,
mate.
yeah, I'd feel uncomfortable every second of the day, I think.
As would I, mate, because he is. he just seems relentless at the moment, and it is sort of his way or no way. And this is the squad that you have to play. He seems almost as if he would dictate a squad that you would have to use rather than going, right, who do you want to sign? What is our investment plan looking like a little bit?
Yeah, because I was saying to one of my friends today, I said, Mudryk, I mean, you're a Chelsea fan, Luca, and I might be way off here, but I was thinking Mudryk starting the game, that seems a bit unusual. That don't seem Maresca wanting to start him. That's like Todd Bowley in his ear saying, play him because we signed him for like 89 million or something. So you got to play him, sort of thing, you know what I mean?
I think it's hard because you think of Salah. We sold Salah years ago. He went off and done well in Italy. He came back and he's been a Liverpool legend and what he's done. And I think we're at the case with Mudryk a little bit, whereby if we sell him and he goes on and excels somewhere else, we will get the blame as a club for not harnessing that talent or going, "Do you know what? We've actually lost a world class player right now if he becomes that." But he's just not performing it for us. He's just not at that level. So sometimes you have to bite the bullet and go, "Do you know what? Actually, okay, he's not good enough for us and wasn't, and we spent all that money." But from a personal perspective, as a coach, and maybe if Maresca was moved on in 5 years and Mudryk's doing well, he can go, "Do you know what? He actually went on and had a good career." And from that
Mm,
personal level, And I'm just looking at the rating today. He had 6.2 average rating today, and I think when you look at the depth foul squad and a player performs that badly, you're going to look at it and go, "Do you know what? You're actually a real easy replacement in that lineup next week."
yeah, absolutely. I think this is it. Is you could say that Maresca's got plenty to choose from, but then I don't know. Uh, it's like a guns to Maresca's head saying these are the players you've got to play. That's what it seems like to me. Even though there's all these players,
Mm.
it's it's a sort of situation that, yeah, I mean, I mean, if I was with Todd Bowley, yeah, I don't know what would happen because I just feel with Todd Bowley, it's very impatient all the time.
Mm.
There's no time for settlement for anything.
And I think that's what it is when it comes to that at the moment. But whilst we touch upon the sort of Chelsea as we're still here, so we discussed Pochettino taking over the USA national team a couple of weeks back, and there's still a bit of delay on him being appointed at the moment. And what I read the other day was because of the contract issues, that's why he's not been appointed. And I think it's something to do with compensation and his salary. So I think what the USA are going to do, from what I've been reading, and they're trying to negotiate a legal deal at the moment whereby they will pay off what is remaining of his contract, and Chelsea will then repay the national team over a period of months or whatever it will be of that compensation that they have covered. So definitely an interesting perspective when it comes to sort of negotiations, Ted Bowley, that board level, the semantics that go within these elements and how Chelsea is looking at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think of it, that's a bit of a mess, isn't it?
Mm.
um, it's, but this is it though. I look on it on a business front, and you're thinking you're losing out on money then because you're still paying out for compo. That money could be reinvested elsewhere.
Mm.
I mean, we're talking about squads and everything like that and players, but it could go towards that to help them become that stronger force. But it's it's an interesting one, and Poch, wish him well. It's going to be an interesting one to watch out for. That's for sure. If USA job.
I think so. And I think fair play to the US national team because they obviously want their man and they're willing to agree that compensation and
Mm,
to go all down that route of the legal side and to cover those fees, etc. So fair play to that national side. But just touching upon some transfer rumors and sort of swinging back around a little bit, mate. This sort of came out in the news this week. Kieran Trippier wants to leave the club in search of more first team football. And it was one of those where Eddie Howe came out with an interview a few days later and said, I'm actually quite surprised by this news considering I think he's a player who wants to get back into that squad. He's like, I'm 33 now, years are picking up. I feel that I could be playing for, I don't know, maybe in Everton again, getting 38 games a year and at least being in contention somewhere for selection and not being in any contention and being rotated into a squad or perhaps not getting 38 games a year. But do you think Trippier leaving is a good move? What do you think about this situation?
it is an interesting one because I still feel we could get going to Newcastle. Um, I mean, Everton. sensible move. But I think we were saying it for a week, wasn't it, that they could have 3 right backs that's in their 30s, like Young, Trippier, and Coleman. I mean, if he was, say, go to Everton, what would make him get more games there really over the other two? It,
Mm.
it's it's a very unusual um, admission from Trippier, because I thought in the Euros, even though he was put out at left back by Southgate, he looked a bit shaky first game or two, but actually did pretty all right in the end. He started to birth that position and do really well. Maybe that's a future position for him if set up for the England team. Who knows? But I do think that it's an interesting one. And if I was Newcastle, I mean, I'd like to have him around for the club still, and I think Eddie Howe's showing that in his comments he's made.
And I got 3 points of interest left I really want to discuss with you on this episode this week, right, mate? But one of them is that sort of same discussion as we're talking about there, 33-year-old in and around that squad. Now, a player who has been consistent, maybe rocked a little bit by injury over years, but played well yesterday, 2 goals in 2 games, and has been playing Premier League football since he was sold from Man United. Hasn't been in the national setup now for 6 or 7 years. Danny Welbeck, although he's a forward and I've looked at his stats and he gets him like 7 goals in like 38 games, right? But for the last few years, he's been consistent like 37, 37, 38. And he's not been scoring mega amount of goals. He's got something like 400 plus games in his career, only 100 goals. So you look at that proportion, it is very, very low, right? But when you look at it and his consistency and the fact that he still offers something and he is still an energetic player, do you think he should be at least considered to be called up to an England squad? And if he was called up, obviously I think he'd be faced with a lot of criticism because people are like, why are we calling these players up when we've got all these youngsters? And okay, fair argument, but he still offers something. If you're looking at trying to succeed and getting players who fit that mold and those jigsaw pieces, as you said, he might be a piece that actually slots in for 5 or 6 games, has an impact, helps us qualify, maybe pushes us a little bit, adds a bit of experience in, and it is good for him as well. Would you even consider looking at him if you're the England manager, considering all the quality we have? Is he a yesterday man? Is he sort of one of those moves where, do you know what, it's actually a negative move rather than a positive? Should he have some sort of consideration? How would you scope that if you were manager?
I think again can see on both sides, but this is it, is on the England front, no one's really going to dislodge Kane, but I do think having experience around the squad is invaluable. That can be whatever level you play at, from grassroots all the way up to the top flight. I mean, it's shown with Brighton. Again, we talk about their recruitment. They've invested in a lot of young players themselves, but they've brought Welbeck in and he's been involved, played, and it's been a catalyst to their success, I suppose. With England's setup, would he fit in that dynamic? I'm not too sure because of um, even though there's a lot of young, hungry players in there. I don't know. It's just a different. If you pardon the pun, it's a different ball game. But this is what the Nations League and friendlies are for, to try things for something like that. And maybe it might be good to see if it does do any favours in that short term, because then you get a feel of can this take place and be a good thing for the national team all round, I suppose.
And I think it
Um,
comes towards that level of, political decisions where we said about Todd Bowley at Chelsea, whether he's dictating decisions. If you're Lee Carsley and you're going, right, I'm considering, Danny Welbeck for a squad or call him up, you might face a load of criticism from the fans. And you might feel you'll shot yourself in the foot a little bit to land that job permanently because of the way that the fans have responded. And therefore, you're selecting a squad based upon what the other stakeholders are saying because of those pressures and the political sphere, as I call it, that surrounds it. And you're not actually being able to do your job because of what comes into it, unless you're really being backed to be the manager and make those decisions. And you're not going to be judged upon your squad selection as such based upon a fan reception. So it is one of those where it is unfortunate if you are a player like Danny Welbeck at times that you might be overlooked because of the pressures that face the manager not to select you. And I think those
That's a very good point. Yeah.
decisions have been done in the past before, and we've seen players being hampered because of it. And it is unfortunate in little ways.
No, very valid points. And I think fan pressure comes in a lot of angles. I think because it's just that political sphere, as you say. We expect, I mean, he's at Brighton now. I don't know what Brighton fans are expecting for the season. I mean, they might want European football back in with the squad that they feel that they've got. But I mean, we wouldn't have been saying that maybe 4 or 5 years ago of can they compete for European football? We'd be saying they'd be still content with mid-table. That's how competitive everywhere's got now. I mean, James Milner, season pro, I mean, still played yesterday against United, didn't look out of place one bit. And if it's in that mould again to build his experience around for younger players to get them through over that line. And that's where Brighton goes smart. And I know I've said it already this podcast, but their recruitment from top to bottom is just unreal. And I'd love to know what makes it tick there because it's just truly phenomenal.
Mm. And again, it comes into that sort of scope of what we said about Neuer, right? Of why would you retire if you're consistently playing games? And I don't understand why Joe Hart retired last year. He's winning cups in his and titles with Celtic. He's number one. He's got 38 games in the league out of 38. He's consistently playing. He's getting up towards like 1,000 games. He's getting paid good money. He's get to stay fit. And obviously, there's always those physical demands if you've been playing 20 plus years, for example. But I just don't understand why you retire. And I'm sort of the same now with James Milner a little bit in the back of he might turn around at the end of the year and retire, even though he's had like 38 games for Brighton or a good 35 plus. I'm like, why? You're consistently playing at one of the best leagues in the world, consistently proving yourself under another manager whereby you've gone in and managers changed over and you're still being selected and still fitting part of the squad and plans. You're almost 40 and you're still playing well. Again, they might be in that space where I don't need the money. I'm quite comfortable. But I'm like, do you know what? Earning your 30K a week or being retired and maybe starting coaching, I'm like, you could have actually got 3-4 years playing maybe more out of you and then delaying coaching a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think James Milner, he seems a different ilk completely because he just wants to keep on going. He's got the engine, um, and he's still got it in a lot of ways. Joe Hart, I was like you, very surprised. But I take the likes of this is I know it's we're talking about perceptions here, but you take the likes of Joe Hart, he's that sort of if you call it face that it would be good for a punditry role or a radio role.
So just signed
Because
for the
he's
BBC, hasn't he? So
oh, was he? I didn't even
yeah,
know that. Yeah, so it might fit him in more, but you'd think, I mean, if I was in that position, yeah, I'd want to play as long as I could. Managing, you'd want to manage as long as you could, coach whatever as long as you want. But it's just like I think players maybe because they're on that good wage, they sort of get sort of numb to other feelings. They just think, oh yeah, I'm comfortable. I can still lead a practical life, and they don't see the fulfillment as much anymore. They just see it as a paycheck in their bank account. End of the day.
definitely interesting for sure, mate. But coming up to our final 2 points very quickly on this one. So it looks like Paul Heckingbottom, again, someone that we've talked about on a podcast previously, has returned to management, had a good 1-0 win yesterday in his first game in charge for Preston. Has been appointed there at Preston North End. I think again he's a good manager. We spoke about him before and potential with him, and it'd be interesting to see whether how the season goes for him at Preston, and it sort of quashes those rumours as to whether David Moyes that we spoke about was going to go back to Preston. And I know we spoke about whether he will end up at Everton at the end of the year or whether he won't. So definitely, I think it's interesting sort of space for Moyes and where he's going to end up in the future. But I think a good appointment. But to finish up on, mate, which was something that you wanted to talk about, was this disallowed goal for Will Hughes in the Premier League almost a week ago now. You wanted to bring this up. This is your point. This is you to lead on, mate.
Yeah, I mean, what I won't repeat what I was actually thinking on that day because there's a lot of effing and blinding, but I I do not understand some rules. I mean, so VAR cannot intervene if the referees call stand. I mean, game's gone soft. I mean, there was hardly anything in that, and it was taken away what was a really good goal from Eze.
Mm,
Um, that would if that would have stood, that would probably been up there as one of the goals of the season already. Going into like May rules, but I just don't understand with this about for free kick that they say. I'm going, even though it's not directly at that, when the linesman flags late now, I don't understand that either.
mm,
I just feel that with referees, it seems to me, I'm going to say it anyway, with referees, it just feels like they're controlled what to do now because there's so many different cameras at the grounds that they're afraid they can't seem to make their own decisions. So they're afraid of making their own decisions, but then they're going to get repercussions from it if it's a wrong call
mm,
because there's so many different cameras on them. Again, I wouldn't want to be a Premiership referee in this modern day. I mean, there's so much stress that comes to it. And I mean, we all can be quite critical of them. Yes, I criticise there in a sense of why blow, why it was too soft. But I wouldn't want to be in that position. It's too stressful these days. You've been watched on 24/7. It seems like. I don't know what you feel about that with a referee in this situation as well.
mm.
But why? I don't know. I VAR. Don't get me wrong. There is some good bits to it. But there's still a lot of work that needs doing, and we say with late flags as well. It's just very, as a football fan, it gets you frustrated, but you take it out again on referees. And what I learned, I don't know if you remember me doing it, Luke, but I did a interview with Kevin Friend once, former Premiership referee,
Mm.
and he said to me, "Thing is, if we make mistakes, we actually get given counselling for that because of with all the pressure that comes with it and the amount of comments that we get on for radio, through social media, it's not very pleasant. We've got to remember that they are human, but we take it out on them and we can all be guilty of it, that, well, they're in control of the match, they should know what they're doing, but they are just human in the day. And I just wonder what your thoughts on refereeing is and this situation here too.
Again, I think we've had VAR for years and years in place now, and it still doesn't even seem to be anywhere near perfected in terms of these are the sort of regulations. This is the procedure. We're constantly sort of it's as if the goalposts are always changing, and it's so inconsistent, and it makes a mockery of the game, which has been the argument for many years by so many different people involved in the game, right? From all different levels, and I think it's one of those like, oh, the VAR can't intervene. It's supposed to be there to intervene, isn't it? Isn't that the
Mm.
point, that a referee has made an incorrect decision, and it gives them an opportunity to go back and review it, or it gives them an opportunity to go, actually, can we just review that? Because what we've seen up here is experienced referees, we've got a different take on that, and let's have a conversation. A bit like the rugby, you see them have that conversation. Those up in the box might say something, the referee goes, all right, let's go with that then, and they make that collective decision. Whereas this seems to be like, and they always seem to come out with excuses.
It's disjointed.
Mm. Yeah, that's the
And I
word I was
think
looking for.
it's just that there's no clarification. I mean, I look on it on a lot of angles here because I see that, again, probably the referee's got a lot of stick from that this week. I've seen it on social media anyway for that decision. But then I look on it in a sense as well, and you look at Palace even. I mean, that could have been a game changer for them because they was 1-0 down then, I believe. It could have been 1-1, if I
Mm.
remember right. Um, I mean, if Palace would have equalised there and it would have stood, it could have been a different outcome for the game. Palace could have ended up winning. Or on the other hand, it could have been where really that this game, this decision, if Palace was on a really bad run of form, it could have ended up Oliver Glasner being sacked.
Mm.
And it's quite worrying that I think for officiating, I'll be honest, is declining. I have seen it better in grassroots. Um, I mean, even at the Euros, it seemed like when it came to other nations with their officiating, they knew what they was doing. They all came. It was cohesive. They all come to a decision quite quickly, particularly with VAR. But when it came to us, we was one of the nations that came up pretty much straight away in the first games, and we took much longer than they did. And you
Mm.
think like this is a bit worrying for our game, really. And the decision they did that vote end of the last season of whether to keep VAR or not. I mean, they said that there was a high proportion of clubs that wanted to keep it. I think it was only one club that said that they didn't want to. That was Wolves.
Mm.
But I look on that and I think, was they just saying that because they was afraid of repercussions from the league or the FA for that matter?
Refereeing, mate, it's not a gig I'd want to ever do, mate. I remember doing it a couple of times when I was coaching in the academy, and I was like, never ever again am I deciding the referee a game. It is the most volatile place to be. It is horrible, and just not something that I'd ever envy the bloke in the middle doing, or the female. But usually from the games I've had, it's always been a male. I've never had a female. It's not a position that I'd ever want to be, mate.
No, absolutely. I think it's very lone. Excuse me. It's a very lonely world out there if you're a referee, especially if you make your wrong decision. If you've got 60,000, if there's a mistake, a big mistake that you've made, say like that, but say you was in front of a crowd of 60,000, for a crowd to be chanting on your back, referees that, so and so, and all on your back and everything like that it's only human that it'd be a natural response that your head will go down after that. And that for other decisions may not be correct because you've been affected by it. And then you got on top of that, well, it's not been so good. Will I, have a game next weekend, say? But I think this is it. I mean, they say about that referees, if they've had a poor refereeing performance, go back to be relegated to the championship for a week. Is that doing them any favours though? Because
Mm.
there's no VAR there. Again, it's that consistency. It's a different ball game completely. And I just feel I have to maybe I wouldn't have said this when I was coaching, but I I do genuinely feel sorry for referees because I know it really must not be an easy job.
Not an easy job at all, mate. And again, it's not something that I'd want to do, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the year brings ahead. Obviously, the consistent questions over refereeing standards in the Premier League, and we got a few days left before the window closes. There's a lot of big games up and coming. There's a big season ahead. So it's definitely a big year ahead for us, as we said at the start, mate. So interesting for sure. As I currently speak, Liverpool are leading Brentford 1-0. So it's currently that's how it looks at the moment. And then there's a few other games which are taking place across Syria and LA Liga for those who are interested. So AS Roma Empoli, 7:45, Napoli and Bogna, 7:45. Napoli got overdone in their opening game with Conte,
Yeah.
3-0 by a very low league club. Which was quite surprising. So, again, that's another club which I'm sort of keeping tabs on because of the manager who is there. Celtic won 3-0 earlier against St. Mirren. Real Madrid currently 0-0 with Valladolid. And then we've got Atletico Madrid and Girona at 8:30 this evening. So just touch upon Real Madrid there. They haven't seemed to have clicked or got going or not scoring or not killing games at the moment when they've got that amazing squad truly available to them. They're just not going. They're just not in like sixth gear. It's like they're in
Yeah.
third and they just haven't got up the gears yet.
Yeah, I think that'd be a matter of time though, and I wouldn't want to be that opposition that gets on the backside of it.
Definitely interesting. So for me, there's a lot which I track across the different games, and I definitely keep up to date with. So, at the moment, I'm tracking like Bayern Munich and Napoli, and I'm looking at what Plymouth are doing, and I'm keeping on top of Wrexham and Atletico Madrid. I'm like, what are they up to? And then Fenerbahce, and then what are Chelsea doing? And then every other club in the Premier League, like Aston Villa, which I'm keeping tabs on. Blackburn Rovers, mate. Like, the list of clubs at the moment I'm tracking is unbelievable. So it's great to be all over the place. But mate, another top tier episode, the longest one that we've recorded in the season 1 and season 2 of this weekly digest. But I think there's been so much to sort of cover and taking us down a great discussion. And I really appreciate your time as always, mate. And I had a good one with you.
Yeah, it's been great, Luke, and look forward to the next one already.
Absolutely, me too, mate. Well, have a great rest of your Sunday and bank holiday weekend, and I'll catch up with you shortly.
Thank you, brother. You too. Have a good one.
And you, mate. Bye bye.
Cheers.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people, because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other 2, and that's absolutely fine.